I play the birth mother to the most beautiful young lady that's getting ready to take a journey. She's just found out that she is an abortion survivor. Two words that I know don't go together. And she finds out that her identity is not what she thinks it has been. The director called me up and said, you know, Shari, I really want you to take a look at the script and tell us what you think. It was a story about me. And it was a story that I finally was able to share with other people. I had had an abortion. And here was something that I hadn't spoken to anyone in 20 years, just a very few people that knew in my life. It was a secret that held me captive for so long. Being a post-abortive woman, being somebody that had gone through that in my life. And here I was, reading something that was about a young woman that was going to take a journey and she was going to come to find me. There's this particular scene where Rachel comes back in and she leaves this note and she writes on it, "I forgive you." And I walk into my office and I see this note, and as a believer, you know, I know that I've been forgiven and I know what the living word tells me. But to see it actually written, the Lord gave me the most beautiful gift to see that, and then He met me there. And we have this moment together in this office where He just shows up and He says, "This is for you, and I have forgiven you, and I love you, and it is done." I was given a chance to share my story, something that had been holding me captive for 20 years of my life. I'm Shari Rigby, and I have been ransomed.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meeke. Well, the movie is October Baby, and it was one of those movies that I guess the critics expected to be a sleeper, but in its opening weekend, it grossed $1.7 million, and that was showing just in a few films, just here in the United States. And if you want a comparison, you would compare The Hunger Games, which opened the same weekend, shown globally, and it grossed $214 million globally. And so when you look at what October Baby did, it was in the top 10. In its opening weekend. So we're going to talk about that. Just really incredible. Shari Rigby here with me in studio. I'm so glad that you are here to talk about October Baby. Not just because it's on DVD and Blu-ray and we want people to go out and continue to support this movie, but because God has done an amazing thing through this film, not just in people's lives, but in your life. You play the birth mother in the film, Cindy Hastings, and why do you think this movie, when you look back on it, why do you think it was so successful at the box office?
That's such a great question, because I think for a lot of people that haven't seen the movie yet, they don't know really what to expect.
Sure.
And I think the reason why it was so successful is because you go in and sit down in this movie theater, and we really took you on a ride.
Yeah.
You know, you had this storyline of young love, of friendships, of a father-daughter, a mother-daughter, a young girl going on a journey to find out actually, you know, who she is in essence, and finding her birth mother. You get to laugh, cry, and I think by the time the film is over, you really sit there and think to yourself, you know, I just went on this emotional roller coaster, and that's what I hope movie goers pay to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's I think what we did.
I think so, to kind of step out of your life for a second and to be a part of a story that you never could have imagined.
Absolutely.
You know, when I think about it, I think that there are a lot of viewers who probably put their politics aside and saw an incredible storyline.
Right.
Now, Shari, I'll tell you this. So there are family-friendly films that people will act in, and they are not necessarily believers, and they may not necessarily have the moral standards that they are demonstrating in the film.
Right.
But for you, you are a believer.
Yes.
So tell our viewers how you came to know the Lord, how long you've walked with Him too.
Well, and that was really interesting for me, because when I had been introduced to the Lord when I was a little girl, but I didn't really know what that looked like. I mean, Sunday school for me was these great stories and little, bread cut sandwiches with jelly on it, and so that's what I related. And then my family moved on to Arizona, and my mother really tried to pull us back into a church again. And I was 13 years old. We were at a church. And the message at that point was really heaven or hell. And I remember being 13 and going, well, I don't want to go to hell. And I, raised my hand to accept the Lord. And I had no idea what that meant at all. And the coolest thing was, though, in that moment, he did.
Wow.
And he took me and knew that I was his child. And so for me, that moment was, my walk was not walking with him, but he was walking with me. And so all of these things really that happened and transpired over my life was quite a roller coaster ride, to say the least. And when I was 25 years old, I ended up reconnecting with my husband that I'm married to now. And the second date, he asked me to go to church with him. And I walked into a church, and I was so scared because I knew all of the things that I was about and who I was and all of the things that I had done. And I walked in, and it was the first time that I actually sat there and I saw people walking in and going, okay, I feel comfortable, and I can wear my jeans and cool shirt, and I can like fit in. And
wow.
But it was the moment that the pastor got up there at Calvary, and he, Pastor Mark Martin, and he got up there and he shared the message of grace. And it was the first time that I had heard the message of grace. And I thought, that's it. That's it for me. And I rededicated my life to Christ at that moment. And then, we all think for that, I think there's a split second in our minds that, okay, well, this means that everything is going to be perfect. Mm-hmm. But lo and behold, the pruning process begins.
Yeah.
And that's a moment where he says, okay, I've been with you, but now it's time for me to take the ashes and turn them to beauty.
Yeah. Wow. And so when we look back, if we kind of rewind just a little bit, you had this awareness of God, but still kind of living your life, doing your own thing. Is this the season in your life where you become an actor? Is this where you start, tell me how this whole transition happened?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting for me too, because I keep going, really? I had a very deep passion when I was a little girl. I grew up in a small town, and a form of entertainment was living in a movie theater that was broken down, or playing in the fields, and really just imagination all the time. And so I really had decided at that point, I wanted to be that girl on that screen. And so there was always a passion for me. But as life went on, that dream was further and further in the distance. I got into a lot of trouble. I became a teenage mom at the age of 17 years old, and realized that I had to go back to school, and I had to make something of myself and something for my child. And then as time went on, when I was remarried, the coolest thing was I had this great picture that life was going to be perfect this time, and that I was going to have a house full of babies. And I was going to be married to this godly man, and what could be better in life? Yeah. And the interesting thing was I think the moment we create these perfect pictures, God's he's saying, well, this is my picture, not yours. Yeah. And so we ended up having our last son, which he was very difficult for me to get pregnant with. And very shortly after that, I found out I wasn't able to have any more children. And so my husband and I had started the coffee shop in our church at that point. And a man walked in and sat down, and I was cleaning up and serving coffee and stuff, and he said to me, have you ever thought about commercials? And I kind of looked at him, and I thought, well, yeah, but, and I wasn't real sure, and, and here's my coffee shop, and Dan Smith, I'll never forget him, and he said, well, I'm casting for a commercial, and I'd like you to come out for it. And I was so scared. And so in a moment, it was a very short time in between that I went from being a woman that was going to have no more children to a whole different life. And I'll never forget going, God, we're going from babies to commercials.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I went in, I stepped out, in faith into that, and I walked into a room full of people and was scared to death. I'd never done that kind of camera work really before, and just a few things here and there, and I ended up booking the job, and that was just a moment that God just started showing me that life was about to change.
And so did you see all of these doors begin to open in this career path? Were there other roles, and are there movies before October Baby? Which is going to be a lot of the way that we've come to know you as October Baby.
Right. There's been movies. I, for years, did a lot of national campaigns for different, commercial companies, American Airlines, Suzuki, you name it. Did tons of print work and for commercial print work. And then all of a sudden, I remember laying and saying, God, I was just praying, and I said, I really want to do more if I'm going to be in this industry. And so I ended up going out for a sci-fi film that I ended up booking.
Wow.
And thought, okay. And so it's been progressive since there, working on soaps, working little, bits and pieces here and there. And then, with October Baby right before that, John Schneider and I actually worked on another film called Not Today, where we played husband and wife in that. So it's just been this it's been a beautiful, I would say, slow growth, not always comfortable.
Sure.
But beautiful growth. And here we are.
And here we are. And so how did you, now thinking about the Irwin brothers, how did you meet them? Or how did they know about you, as they're working on October Baby? Because I know that they had to have an actress who would look like their main actress, right? And so how did you come to know them?
Well, back in 2007, I was in Los Angeles visiting with my niece and some family there. And there was a gentleman that I have the greatest story of that we ended up meeting, and he had mentored my niece. And we ended up connecting, and he really was the first person that came into my life, Chaz Corzine, to mentor me, and just a godly man. And he said, these are the men you're going to work with someday. And he had, said about the Irwins and showed me some stuff that they were doing with Christian music videos. And very soon after that, I received a phone call from John Irwin, and he said, Chaz has called us, and we've looked at your stuff, and we'd love to use you for this music video called Slow Fade for the Casting Crowns for Fireproof, the new movie.
Wow.
And so we're doing it film style, so we want to bring a film actress in to do it. I said, great. So that was my first introduction to them, and we ended up taking the Dove Award for Best Video of the Year that year.
Wow.
And so we were kind of on this roll. And that was my first introduction. So I was like, when John Irwin called, I thought, you better pick up the phone because it's going to be good.
Wow. And yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. Now, can we say, is it okay for us to, because you're talking about your niece and who mentored your niece. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but who's your niece?
My niece is Jordan Sparks.
Yeah, that America loves. I mean,
they love her. They do.
So I just think that's fun trivia that most people would not even know that Jordan Sparks happens to be your niece.
Well, and it's interesting that you were talking about that for a second, because in all of my interviews, I want to say maybe one other interview, United States-wise, asked me about Jordan. But the first real people that brought it up on radio, which I thought this was hysterical, was the Australian media.
Really?
And I thought, how did we go all this time without, really
stateside.
And when they asked me the question, it actually really threw me off, because I thought, you're interviewing me from Australia and you're the ones asking me.
Jordan Sparks.
So I was like, okay.
Well, Shari, tell me about when you received the script in the mail from the Irwin brothers, and you're reading October Baby. Tell me what that was like.
Well, it was really interesting, actually, because I was driving down the road with my oldest son, and I was complaining, actually, about being in Hollywood. It had been a year that we had moved there, and I had received this other film role, but things had been put on hold because of permits in India and so on, and I was really in a complain mode. And that's when John Irwin made the phone call to me, and I'm driving down the freeway, and I pick it up, and John starts, hey, how's it going? And I've got this film role. Remember, we were telling you we were going to have a feature. Well, here it is. He said, Shari, he said, we have this role for you. We're not going to tell you what the script is about, but we're going to email it to you, and we want you to read it. And if you enjoy it, this is who your character would be. You let us know, and the part's yours. And I thought, wow, I'm not a Hollywood talent.
That's amazing.
So this is super cool, and I was trying to stay very cool and calm and collect, be like, yes. And so I got home, and my husband was the same way, because I got home, and the coolest thing is that he had already printed the script.
By the time you got home.
And he had it laying on the counter, and it's like all, lined out.
Yeah.
And the coolest thing is the scripts normally don't come with a picture on it. So I'm a pretty visual person, and they usually come just with a name and then who it's been written by, and that's your front page. Well, this one happened to come with a picture of Rachel Hendricks on it.
Wow. Who plays the character Hannah?
Who plays
in October
Hannah.
Baby.
And the first words out of my husband's mouth was, "This girl looks so much like you." And it just, you know, I was so excited. I mean, it's brewing inside of me. And my husband, so dear, he sets up my little fireplace and he's got me going. And I go to my favorite room in the house, and lo and behold, that it was going to be a tearjerker. And I sat down and I started reading the script. And really almost from the first 10 pages of it, I knew I was going on an emotional roller coaster. The interesting thing was, though, in reading the script, my first connection was that we were reading a story about a young woman that has survived an abortion. So it really didn't hit me that this character and who I was until Jasmine Guy comes on. And obviously, I don't know who the character Jasmine Guy is at this point. I'm just reading the nurse's role. And as I start reading it and hearing what the nurse is saying to Hannah, I realize that she's talking about me. All the way to my job as, you know, working in the law firm, and I'm crying and crying, and then I get to the last scene of the film where I'm in this moment with my husband, which really happened in life. And I'm just bawling, and I remember my husband coming around the corner, and he's just looking at me like, "Have you lost your mind? You know, what are you reading?" And I shared with him, and we were both just in a state of shock really over it. And I called up John, and I started telling him, and he just kept going, "Wow, I feel so bad as a man that he had to get this tear-jerking phone call."
I tell you what, though, let's take a quick break.
Sure.
And when we come back, we're going to kind of unpack that experience, and we're going to take it apart, because that was a journey, the beginning of a journey that's brought you to where you are now and where you're going to continue to go, because the Lord is using your testimony in ways I think you never could have imagined.
Never. I can't wait to share.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Shari Rigby of October Baby in studio. Thanks so much for watching Meeke.
Next time on Meeke.
Iran trying to come up with nuclear weaponry. Israel concerned about that. The whole world should be.
The amount of women, the percentages of women who feel undervalued, or who feel that within the walls of the church, they are unable to live out their high calling or walk in their gifts.
So none of this was stolen? Like, who has gold bars in their house?